Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We should be getting started shortly. My name is Coco Tang. I'm with Keller Williams Realty. Thank you for joining tonight. Today we have our special guest, which is James Callejas from IPX 1031. So he's the 1031 exchange expert. So before we start, I wanted to just do a very quick survey. I assume everyone on the call owns more than one property. That's why you are here for 1031, right? So if you own one property, please type 1 in the chat, or if you own more than one property, you can type 2 in the chat. So we're kind of like getting to know you a little bit, and then wanted to see what we can do tonight. What's the most interesting topic for you in terms of 1031 exchange for you? So we can, let's see. Don't be shy. Anyone owns more than one property, you can type 2. And if you only own one property, you can type 1. So kind of getting to know what you're looking for to get out from this seminar as well. No one typed anything. James, I was going to do a little survey to see whether you guys are happy with the election result, but I decided that may be a little too dangerous because we don't want this seminar to be political, right? We are real estate. Well,
I've learned many years ago, Coco, that that's not the forum for real estate. It just does not work, and we don't need to go into that. However, we can talk about how the election results, and we will talk about how the election results have impacted 1031 and some of the relevant topics to that.
That's exactly why we're having the seminar tonight. Yeah, thank you, James. So nobody typed how many properties you own. I was just trying to get some data so I know that what's the most interesting thing for you. So for example, if you just own one property, you're thinking about doing a 1031. So maybe James can start with the very basics. If you actually owns multiple properties, you've done this before, you want to know a little bit more advanced information, then maybe we can have James focus on the more advanced topics. But
Or
either
even
yeah.
we can even open it up on a more general level. And if there's a specific topic matter that someone wants me to cover in regards to Section Code 1031, please enter it in the chat. This is an educational forum for everyone who attends, and we're here to empower and educate, hopefully entertain at the same time. So the three E's, not ears, but the three E's that we can illustrate within the next hour.
That sounds great. So I'm meeting more people here. So that sounds great. So thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Once again, my name is Coco Tang. I'm with Keller Williams Realty in Silicon Valley. And James is the expert for 1031. So let's get started. Maybe since no one's giving me feedback of how many properties you actually own. So let's just get started with the very basics and then see which kind of topics you wish to cover, and then we can go from there. Go ahead, take over, James. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have a few cowards on the line today. Not one person has put anything in the chat, or maybe it's not working. Maybe it's not working.
That's
But
okay.
it,
I
it
guess
it's okay. I think we should start off just so that everybody understands
I
what the
got one
10.
answer though. I got one answer, 3. So I was gonna say, yeah, okay, cool.
Okay, it's
And then
working. I love it. People are starting to chime in, which is really good. Um, so I think I'm going to start off, Coco, with a brief definition of what the 1031 exchange is so everybody knows very quickly. It's an internal revenue code, everyone, and it's been around for over 100 years, and it's for investment property. So the 1031 exchange is internal revenue code 1031 that's been in place since 1921, and it allows you to sell investment property and buy investment property. And if you follow certain guidelines, which I will review today, you'll be in a position to defer all capital gains tax. And this is really huge, especially in the state of California, because most of the time when you make a lot of money on something and you sell it, you have to pay taxes. This is the one wealth building machine that allows you to make a ton of money, and you can do that in California quite easily through real estate. And instead of paying the piper, you get to reinvest into better real estate. So it's a very popular internal revenue code, and it's rampant in the state of California. We're a national company, so we get to see all the numbers. California dominates, I mean, in a big way. No one else is even close to the numbers that we produce because there's so much massive appreciation and the taxes are so high in the state of California. So most people that sell investment property usually consider the 1031 exchange instead of paying the capital gains tax. In some situations, they don't need to for a number of different reasons, but in a lot of scenarios, it's a great tool that they can use to get into other pieces of investment property.
That sounds great. So maybe you can cover like the basics. What do we need to know in terms of 1031 exchange? What timelines we need to know? Once we have the basics, then people can start chiming with your specific questions, like what you want to know from
And
today's topic.
I think that's a good idea, Coco. I'll go through it, why we do it. I'll give an example, and then at some point, probably 20 minutes from now or something like that, I want to let you understand how the election results impacted the 1031 exchange and what we need to look forward to in 2025. So like I mentioned, the 1031 exchange is for investment property. But what I want everybody here to understand, because I hear this all the time, when people talk to me or when they come to a seminar, they go, yeah, I don't pay tax. I do a 1031 exchange. I'm here to change that mindset today. If we don't want to pay tax, it's a very simple strategy. Do not sell the real estate. You don't pay taxes if you don't sell. So the question really is, why are we doing a 1031 exchange if we're not doing it to not pay the capital gains tax? Hold on. Eric has a question. I'm retiring and want to sell my Sunnyvale house in the next 5 years, and is the majority of my retirement plan valued at 2.5 million. Okay, Eric, chime in if that's your primary residence or an investment property. And
Maybe
I
we
think
come up with strategy.
there's different strategies for both, and that's the only reason I asked, because most people will say, duh, it's an investment property. Wait a minute. There's ways to work the code around both the primary and investment. So if you could chime that in, Eric, then I'll be able to give two different scenarios in that. But back to why we do a 1031 exchange. If it's not to pay the taxes, then why do we do a 1031 exchange? And to me, the answers are so different for so many different people. Myself, my wife and I have been landlords for 19 years, and we've learned over the last 19 years that we hate being landlords. We almost hate people at this point because it's been so difficult over the years dealing with so many different issues of being a landlord, the tenants, the trash, the toilets, the termites, all the terrible T's that are involved. But the problem is, I don't want to pay the taxes if we sell the asset. So what's the solution? I don't want to sell the property and be another landlord. The beauty of the 1031 exchange is we could sell this property, do a 1031 exchange, so we don't give anything in capital gains tax, and reinvest into a passive type of investment property. And there are many different examples. We went into a Delaware statutory trust, a DST, which I'll review a little bit later, as a replacement property option, where we absolutely have no management responsibility. We've doubled our income. We have increased depreciation. We're very happy to tell everyone on the call today, I don't get the monthly text messages from my tenant. I don't have to pay the yearly HOA fees or the home warranty fees. I don't have to deal with the maintenance of the asset, and we didn't pay anything in capital gains tax. And we're into something that has given us the things that we're looking for in investment property. And that's just one example of why people do 1031 exchanges. So when you really look at a 1031 exchange, I look at the property being sold. What's wrong with it? Why don't we like that property? For me, we hated being a landlord. For some people, it's an older property that needs maintenance. For other people, oh my God, the HOA is what they're wanting us to do right now. We just can't deal with this investment property. It doesn't make sense any longer, but we don't want to sell for the taxes. Some people no longer like the state of California, and they want to leave California and move their investment property somewhere else. Some people have multiple investment properties, and they're just like, oh my God, managing all these different properties together. It would be so cool if I could just sell them all and buy something big that gives me everything that I'm looking for. So some people consolidate. And then sometimes people say, you know what? I made so much money in this property in Los Gatos and I want to sell it. And I built up all this equity and I love being a landlord. And I want to buy all kinds of condos and townhomes and single family homes throughout California, or maybe some outside of California, and just get the benefits of owning the real estate, the write-offs, the appreciation, the cash flow, the different advantages in different states. So there's a lot of different reasons why people do 1031 exchanges. But again, it comes down to the property that you currently own. What's wrong with that property to you? And sometimes people say, you know what? There's nothing wrong with my property. I just don't want to deal with it any longer. But what I would like to do is sell this property and buy something somewhere else and make it my final destination, my absolutely dream home. And many people want to buy in places like Hawaii, or maybe it's a non-state tax area like Nevada or Tennessee or Texas or Florida or wherever. A lot of people watch the show Yellowstone and they say, you know what, that mountain area in Montana just looks awesome. You could do a 1031 exchange, selling your investment property, buying that dream home, wherever it is, rent it out for the first year or two. And it can be rented out a variety of different ways: full-time rent, part-time rent, Airbnb, place for traveling nurses, whatever. You have to treat it and operate it as investment property. And then after doing that for a year or two, you can convert it to a primary residence or a full-time vacation home. So again, people do 1031 exchanges for a lot of different reasons. When I talk to investors, some of them have the same complaints. Some of them have the same goals. Some of them are happy with their properties. But when they are looking to sell the asset, they mostly all agree that they don't want to pay the capital gains tax, especially if the property is in the state of California, because you're not going to sell an asset in California and get out without paying at least 30% on your gains. If you pay less than 30%, it's probably land and you probably don't have much income that year. And that's why. But for the majority of people in California, you're going to cross that 30 percentile. So again, the 1031 exchange, in my opinion, is one of the greatest wealth building tool that exists out there. And it is done for a variety of different reasons. We can go through those reasons in depth and I can answer questions. But the way it normally works is the property no longer makes sense. And they call someone like Coco and say, Coco, I hate this property, but it made so much money and I want to sell it. And you've been talking about the 1031 exchange and you had that guy, James, come on. And I want to talk about where I'm going to put the money. And so what I would recommend in any scenario, there's a brief conversation with myself, with Coco, or by myself. It doesn't matter, to confirm that the property qualifies for a 1031 exchange. And then at that same point, I would revisit my conversation with Coco and say, look, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a property, and then describe it. And she probably can help you, whether it's residential or commercial property anywhere in the United States, at least in the local areas, or even not so local. She can probably represent you, or she has other people on her team in other areas that can definitely help you out. So my thought on the 1031 exchange: find out what you don't like about the property. Probably already know this, but there could be multiple reasons. Find out what you do like about the property. That's pretty obvious. And find out what you'd like to improve on the property, because that's going to be the escape plan. Then you'll talk to me to make sure it qualifies. Then you'll list the property for sale, eventually accept an offer, open up escrow at that point, and then you have to get in contact with someone like myself, because the 1031 exchange, and if you take anything from today, if you're looking to do a 1031 exchange, it must be set up prior to the close of escrow. And the reason being is the seller can't touch the money. They can't be in constructive receipt of the money, or they're a taxpayer. So again, all the preliminary conversations, get Coco to list the property, eventually accept an offer, open up escrow, and then say, James, I accepted an offer. I just opened escrow. What do we need to do next? And I'll let you know. We need a copy of that contract. Why do you need the contract? Well, because we assign into the rights. We actually become the seller for you. And we need a copy of the title report because it'll show who the owner is. Coco, you have a question?
Yeah, so actually, since we were talking about the one Eric's home in Sunnyvale, So Eric, so that's part of, so you mentioned about the different reasons for doing 1031 exchange. So Eric's mentioned that my wife and I are divorced but own the home together. It is her primary home, but you know, not mine. So basically, how does he do a 1031 exchange for this home?
Um, okay, I'm reading the chat right now. So when did Eric move out and what is the gain on the property? So if Eric moved out within the last 3 years and the property were to be sold, he would still qualify for the primary residence exclusion. And if the gain was 500,000 or less, it probably isn't because we're in California, but if it was, I would recommend just selling the property and you can keep the gain money tax free. If the gain is more than 500,000, which it probably is, then sadly, it does not qualify for a 1031 exchange for Eric right now, unless his ex-wife is paying rent to him. And that usually is not the case in my experience. But if she is paying rent for his 50% interest, then it would qualify for a 1031 exchange and he could exchange his portion. If not, then she needs to either start paying him rent for his 50% interest or it won't qualify, or she moves out and they rent the whole property out for a year or two in order to qualify for the exchange. Now, again, if Eric moved out in less than 3 years, he still qualifies for the primary residence exclusion. And if him and his ex-wife were to decide upon selling it together, then they could both protect all gains and get their money out respectively. If the gain is over 500,000 and Eric has not lived in the property 2 out of the last 5 years, and she is not paying him rent, Eric qualifies for nothing but paying taxes on his portion, and his ex-wife qualifies for the 250. In that scenario, the best move going forward would probably be for her to either pay him rent for his 50% interest, or she moves out and they rent out the whole property. I don't know how. Yes, about 1.5 years. So you still qualify. Is it the gain 425? If so, you could sell the property. I would recommend selling the property right now, both of you, and you can cash out tax free. The gains under 500,000, you both would be able to get away with, not get away, but you'd be under the code of not paying any capital gains tax within that sale. So if you moved out 1.5 years ago and you lived in it 2 out of the last 5 years, meaning you've owned the property for at least 3.5 years, then you could sell the property right now and qualify to protect all your gains if the gain is 425, because I'm not sure what you mean by that when you paid 425 sale 2.5. Okay, that doesn't work then. like I thought 25 million.
2.5.
Is it because 2.5, right? If it's
Yeah.
okay. I was about to say somebody won the lottery. Still 2.5 is awesome. So Eric, you still qualify for the 250, but that's not going to get you much protection because your gain is 1.25, half of it. What I would recommend in this scenario, ideally your ex-wife has been paying you rent, but I doubt it, just because that normally doesn't happen. If she has, you could sell it now and you could take the 250 and 1031 exchange the remainder of your 50% interest. If not, I'd recommend that the two of you, because you both have a large gain, if you could agree, start renting the property out, rent it for a year, sell it. You still lived in it 2 out of the last 5. Take the 250, exchange the rest. In a scenario like that, you're going to combine both section codes, the 250-500 and the 1031 exchange will be able to protect the rest. That's if she's willing to agree to do this. But you're running out of time. Yeah, then work it out right now so you can start to get that. Would she be okay with selling it in a year? Because if so, you could probably take advantage of both. If not, and you're going to keep it longer, then when you eventually decide to sell, you could 1031 exchange your entire portion. But you need to start working out that rental agreement so that when she sells the asset, she doesn't have to go start to rent it because you wouldn't qualify. But if she starts renting from you a year from now, I would feel comfortable doing a 1031 exchange for your portion if she's renting from you. So I would recommend going that way. Make sure that it's a market value rent So it's not market value rent to the entire property because you only own 50%. So if market value rent, for example, was 4,000, then she pays you 2 grand a month. And there's ways to work that out if there's problems with those numbers, but you want to at least, yeah, yeah, that would be correct. It's a great question, and it's a very common scenario since there are many divorces in the state of California, actually in the United States, where there are scenarios like this and where people just don't know what to do. So that's a conversation that I probably would have with her tomorrow if I were you to see how that would go moving forward, because it's a great strategy as a real estate investor to protect the equity. I mean, because that's the name of the game out here, right? In California, actually anywhere in the United States, you're going to realize a lot of taxes on gains. And if there's a way to protect all the equity, this would be it.
Yeah.
No, you cannot do a 1031 exchange with investment property outside of the United States unless it's a U.S. territory, and not all U.S. territories qualify either. Puerto Rico does not, but the others do. So ideally, yes, but unfortunately, no. Right. And the door, it doesn't matter about the divorce. It's about when you live there or not. I'm sure you were separated prior to the divorce. So just moving forward, you want to start renting the property out to her at that 50% interest. And that's a lesson to all of us here, that there are ways to strategize with seasoning to take advantage. That's fine if that is still in the garage. It doesn't matter. You're not living there. So I would definitely start that rental agreement as soon as possible. Does anybody have any questions on that strategy? Because that's really big, not just in a divorce scenario, but in many scenarios, people buy the property for 500,000. You're welcome, and sell it for 2.5, 3 million, or whatever the number is. And they tell me, look, James, I can only protect 500,000. Can you 1031 exchange the rest? And I let them know, unless it's investment property or a part of its investment property, and when it's a part, only that part would qualify, it doesn't work. So what you can do is convert it to investment property. And a lot of people do this because paying the taxes on $2 million, you're going to lose about 700,000, and they don't want to do that. So what they would do is they would move out, they would rent it for 1 to 2 years, then they would sell it, still get the 500, and 1031 exchange the rest. Coco.
So James, would you get the full amount of 500,000, or do you actually have to prorate it? Because I heard if you moved out and start renting it, and then even if you move back to try to occupy that as a primary home, but because it
So
has to,
that's two different questions. So to answer your question, if it's my primary and I convert it to investment property and I sell it 2 years later, I don't have to prorate anything. I will get the entire 500,000 because I'm married, and I will 1031 exchange the other $2 million in this example. Now, if I had moved out and then moved back in, that changes things. So you can't do that. If it was primary always and you moved out and rented, no proration. If it was investment or second home or something that you converted to investment and then back to primary, then all the years after 2009 where it was not a primary will not be protected. So they will prorate it based on use of the property after 2009. So to answer your question, Coco, it depends. But if it was always a primary and you convert it to investment property and sell it 2 years down the road, as an example, they will not prorate anything. It's only when you convert that property back to a primary, the non-primary years do not count.
got it. So that leads to another question, which is a very common question. When we're doing a 1031 exchange, somebody sold their investment home and bought an investment home, right, as a 1031 exchange. So they are able to postpone that capital gain. Then maybe 2 years later, they moved in to that investment property, start occupy that as a primary home. So when they are selling that property later on, do they have to prorate their
Yes,
capital
they
gain?
do. They will prorate it. When you convert an investment property through a 1031 exchange, there are two provisions. Number one, in order to qualify for the primary residence exclusion, you have to own the property for a minimum of 5 years. You still have to live in it 2 of the 5, but the years that it's rented are not protected. So if I rented it for 2 and lived in it for 3, I hit the 5-year mark, I owned it 5, I hit the 2 year mark. I've lived in it 2 of the 5, but only 3 of the 5 years I owned it. So 60% of the exclusion will work and the other 40 will not. So I
So
will
you,
only, at
so
a
you,
maximum number, be able to protect 300,000 for a married couple.
okay, so then what about the capital gain that was postponed into the property?
I'll pay capital gains tax on whatever portion, and I'll be able to protect the 60%, and that's it.
So the 60% basically.
But
So,
60% of 500,000. So if my gain is 1 million, then I'd only be able to protect 300,000 of the $1 million gain.
mm, the
So it
rest,
depends what the numbers are. You, the longer you live in it, the more. So if I rented it for 1 year and lived in it for 9, then 90% of the exclusion would be protected. But depending upon my gain would determine exactly how much I can protect. So if my gain is $2 million and I could protect 90% of the exclusion, I could protect 400,000, but the other 1.6 I'm paying taxes on.
so that whatever that gain, capital gain is starting from how much you're paying for versus how much you'll be selling for. Whatever that was transferred from the previous property in the
Yeah,
1031
your
that
basis will follow you in perpetuity until you die. That's the beauty of real estate. When you die in real estate, the gains are forgiven and they give you what they call a step up in basis. So if I bought it for 100,000 and I sell it for 1 million, I pay taxes on 900,000. But if I bought it for 100,000 and I pass away, then the basis, that 100,000, would be stepped up to current value, 1 million. And if the beneficiary sells it at that point, then they would pay zero in capital gains tax unless they sold it for more than 1 million. And by the way, in the state of California, because I think probably most people on the call are from California, there is Prop 19 as well. So in death, you get the step up, and that's a push to sell the property. But Prop 19, it means, let's go back to that example. Bought it for 100, it's worth 1 million, $900,000 gain, but there's a death. Now that 100 goes to 1 million. When I originally bought it, I was paying property taxes on 100,000, which is not that much. When you die, Prop 19 reassesses the property taxes to current value. So the beneficiary would have to pay property taxes at the million number. And now, instead of paying $1,000 per year, you're paying over $10,000 in property taxes per year. So that's another push, or maybe not a push, that might not be the right word, but that's something you need to consider when inheriting the property. And the only way around that is if it's a primary residence and you're a beneficiary and you move into it. So if the person that dies, it's their primary, the step up occurs, Prop 19 occurs, unless the beneficiary moves into the property and they can retain the lower property tax basis. But if people own multiple properties and you're not moving into anything but the primary, all the other ones will be reassessed. So it's just an eye opener to people that it's probably a better idea to sell the property rather than having to pay the higher property taxes because it just does not pencil well.
that makes sense, yeah. So going back to the question, I just want to get a little more detail. So when they're doing a 1031 exchange, so they are postponing whatever that capital gain into the next property, right? But then the owner moved into that property to convert that into a primary home. So that capital gain exemption, whatever that basis, starts from the purchase price of the replacement property, right? So basically, whatever was transferred from the previous property, that has been wiped out. Is that right?
No, no, it's not. So if I bought the original property for 100,000 and I sell it for 1 million and I do a 1031 exchange and I buy the next property for 1 million, I still have the $900,000 gain
The gain, right? So it was postponed into the next property.
into
So
the next property.
okay, so if the owner moved back in, say for example, moved in for 4 years, okay, so they rented for 1 year, so they have 90%, actually they have 80% of the
Protection.
protection. So if, for example, they sold it for 1.5 million, okay, so they have 500,000 gain from the purchase price of 1 million, right?
But no, they're if the original property that was sold for the first exchange is 100,000, their gain is still, well, at that, in that example, the gain would be $1.4 million.
So the calculation will start from the original exchange price.
The basis always follows you until you die.
Got it.
And the
So
only way you can increase the basis is if you improve the property, and it only increases by the improvements that you've done. So if I bought it for 100, but I put 200 into it, my basis is now 300. But if
right.
I've depreciated it, it's gone down lower. But sadly, you can't buy a property for $1 million in an exchange and think that the gains are forgiven. They're not. They follow you.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's get to the couple questions from Ian before you get into the impact from the election. Number one question, can you exchange an ADU that is rented when selling the house?
Wait, are we reading this one? If a home was a primary home, however, it's been rented out as investment property for more than 5 years, does the 1031 protect 100% of the gain to a new property? Yeah, as long as you buy of equal or greater value. But I would highly recommend that if it was a primary, if you sell it after converting it to investment property within the first 3 years, after a year of owning it as a rental, you would get the primary residence exclusion and you could 1031 exchange everything else. So you can keep tax-free money. But in this question, if you've owned it as investment property for more than 5 years, the 1031 exchange could protect 100% of the gain to the new property as long as you buy of equal or greater value. And that could be spread out between multiple properties. It doesn't have to just be one.
I think that's a private question to you, right? I don't see that question.
Oh, yeah. Well, now it's not so private.
Yeah, but I typed out a private question in the chat. So,
Oh, okay, here we go. Can you exchange an ADU that is rented when selling the house? I'm assuming the house is the primary. Yes. And so there will be a percentage to the ADU, the in-law, the casita, the rooms you rent out, the home office, whatever investment portion of the property that's being sold will qualify for a 1031 exchange, and the remainder would be the primary residence. And it's just a number. And the percentage is based upon how you've been depreciating the property. That number should come from your tax advisor. They would give it to us and they would say, okay, they're selling this property, but there's an ADU on the property and it's worth about 20% of the property or whatever the number is. And then that allocation would go towards the exchange and the remainder would be for the primary residence exclusion. Exchange multiple properties owned with the partner and rented out. What is the best process with 1031? Where at the end, each partner owns its own share separately. So number one, I'd like to know how the partners own the property together. Is it in one entity or do they own it as tenants in common? And that makes a difference. And what I mean by that is Coco and I could own properties a couple of different ways. We could own it in some sort of a corporation or an LLC or some entity where there is one tax ID number and we own it together 50-50 as an example. And if that's the case, and we've been operating it like that, so we're filing what they call a K1, which is a partnership return form, and we've been doing that for some time, it is one entity that qualifies for the 1031 exchange, that entity. And if we're looking to go separate ways for 1031 purposes, that's difficult because you can't sell as one taxpayer, the LLC, and buy as two separate taxpayers, James and Coco. So there are ways to plan around that, and sometimes those ways can be done easily, and sometimes it's more challenging, but it's a case-by-case scenario. Now, if we had owned the property as tenants in common, and she owns it in her name, and I own it in my trust, when we sell the property, we can go our separate ways from the start. And that's the easiest way to leave a potential partner in an investment property. Otherwise, there should be planning and seasoning in advance in order to go your separate ways. So when you're exchanging multiple properties with a partner, we'd have to have a separate conversation to find out how many properties and what they're looking to do. Are they trying to exchange with each other so that if they own two properties 50-50. Now they just want to each own 100%. Um, Possibly that could work. It's unlikely, but it could. Or are they just trying to not own with that other person any longer and they want to see how they can do that? And again, it's going to be based on how they own it with that other person. So what I'd like to do is find out if they own it as tenants in common or in one entity together.
I'm actually very surprised with that answer because my understanding is when you do a 1031 exchange, whatever title vesting you had has to be exactly the same when you are buying your replacement property. So you're saying you can actually depart from each other
It
uh,
depends.
by holding title
Yeah,
separately.
it, it, it depends on how they hold title. And sometimes people get confused by that because what if I hold something in my trust, right? And I want to buy in just my name. Some people think that's different. Most of the time, it's not different. If it's a living revocable trust, I'm still filing under my social security number and I could buy as James under my social security number. And that's not an issue. It becomes an issue when, let's say I had it in an irrevocable trust. Maybe I inherited the property and it has its own tax ID number. And now I'm trying to buy as James. The number needs to match, Coco. Social to social, tax ID to tax ID. And I think the layer of confusion gets even more rampant when you see two people on title. And some people say, okay, James and Coco are on title to this property. They have to buy together. Well, if we're on title to the property being sold as tenants in common, no, we do not. We're on title together. We own it together, but we don't file taxes together. We file it separately for our ownership interest in the property. And it doesn't have to be 50-50. It could be 60-40, 70. It could be different numbers. But determining if you can go separate ways from day one will be based on how you file your taxes for that property. And that should correlate with the way you hold title to the property.
So for example, if you own 60%, when you are transferring to the next property, the the gains that it can be transferred by you will be 60% of the gains.
So if we're selling something for $1 million and you own 60 and I own 40, you would do an exchange for 600,000 into the next property,
Got
and
it.
I would do it for 400,000, and we
Makes
don't
sense.
have to buy together.
Makes sense because we're filing taxes separately. But if you're holding titles LLC or trust because you're filing taxes under that one company, that's why you have to.
Remain together, or if we determined a year in advance, Coco, that we were looking to sell and exchange separately, we would dissolve those entities in advance, hold titles as tenants in common, and season it for 1 to 2 years, and then sell. And then we don't have to worry about staying together. We can go separate.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, great. So I think we have about 20 minutes left for the seminar. Do you want to share with us how the
Yeah.
election impacted the 1031?
So, really quickly, for our example, if you wanted an answer on the example, list the property for sale, accept offer, open up escrow, contact me, get 1031 exchange account set up prior to close, escrow closes, clock starts ticking. You have 45 days to let us know what you're going to buy, 180 days to close it. Use all the money, buy of equal or greater value within those timeframes. You pay zero in taxes. That's a very basic example of a 1031 exchange. If you want to walk through on a specific scenario or questions, let me know. Now, I've been doing this since 1998, and I've gone through one, two, three, four, five presidents, I think, going on fifth. Every president has threatened to eliminate or limit the 1031 exchange. Now, there have been proposals every single time in there, and there's going to be proposals again where they think it may be advantageous to eliminate the 1031 exchange because if you do that, then people will sell their properties and all these tax dollars will be generated. The reality is, and we've educated congressmen over the last 15 years. I can't tell you the number of dinners that we've gone to for congressmen to educate them one by one, um, and Zooms and meetings and all kinds of things. Um, what they have now learned, because they didn't know before, is that if you don't, if you eliminate the 1031 exchange, people don't sell because the tax consequence is too high. As a matter of fact, the Biden administration in the beginning were proposing limiting the 1031 exchange to 500,000 and increasing taxes. And it was really undefined what the 500,000 meant. Now, we have been lobbying, and all congressmen unanimously voted to get that part thrown out. And we were successful. We hired Ernst and Young to do a report on it, and it actually showed how much the 1031 brings to the table instead of taking away. You have to understand when people sell investment property, they fix it usually before they sell it. So, how many people are involved in the fix? How many bills are being paid in the fixed? Then they list it and a realtor gets paid. There's inspectors, the inspectors get paid. There's work that gets done because of that. If it's an investment property, there's going to be a 1031 exchange company. There's going to be an escrow company. When the buyer buys the property, they're going to do changes to the property as well, and the property taxes will increase significantly. And they have to go buy something really quickly, and this whole cycle continues. So we showed them the light. But in the Trump administration, prior to this one, honestly, they got rid of personal property exchanges, and we were 2 votes away from getting rid of real property exchanges. So whether it's a Republican president or a Democratic president, I think as investors and as real estate professionals, we need to unite to get the message to congressmen to let them know that this Internal Revenue Code should not change in any way. We will find out in the first 90 to 100 days of the Trump administration what their plans are. Now, in advance, what we've done, and we've done this for every president, and Coco, I'll give you the link. You could go, there's a couple of different links, but the one that I know is only on our website. But there's others out there where you would put your name, you click the link, put your name in there and your zip code, and letters would automatically be generated to your local congressman to let them know you do not want the 1031 exchange to change in any way. And I think that this is important because I think this year it looks like the Republicans are going to take the House as well. And when a party controls both the House and the Senate, it's easier to get things passed. And so we need to be careful. We need to unite. We need to make sure that nothing changes in terms of this code, because I will tell you this, if the 1031 exchange were to go away or be limited in some capacity, it will put real estate into a recession. It will kill commercial real estate because all commercial property qualifies for a 1031 exchange, and it just won't be good for investors in real estate. So the message today is it didn't matter who won the election. We are on guard at all times. It's scarier when one party controls both the House and the Senate. So we have to be very careful to pay attention to their policy and what they're going to say within the first 100 days. Prop 33 did not pass, which was also good as an investor because that was going to leave the doors open and give the tenants, and it's already a very tenant-friendly state, give the tenants an unequal amount of rights in properties that they don't own. I don't need to get into that proposition in depth, but it really would have been bad to investors of real estate and landlords to real estate. And from that aspect, it was very good that it did not pass. But the fight is never over for preserving Section Code 1031. And does anyone have any questions on that or on the new administration and how that will impact real estate? On a positive note, it does the message is that real estate is rumored to do extremely better in 2025, particularly second quarter moving forward.
What's the rumor again?
the real estate market is going to increase, and interest rates at some point in the second and third quarter will be lowered, and we could see by the end of the year the high fives. And when you pay points, you can get down a lot lower as well on interest rates. So we're excited to see what's going to happen moving forward, but we're also on our toes as investors and real estate professionals to make sure that nothing silly happens. And that would be silly, and we've shown it. But the problem is proposals get put together and they throw a lot of things in the proposals, and we want to make sure that nothing that does not make sense remains in the proposal. We want to make sure that anything that does not make sense is taken out.
Okay. Going back to that rumor, that's like a projection, but I think interest rates probably will drop next year. Don't know whether, so you just mentioned second or third quarter. So usually the hottest season for real estate, for sellers, I guess, is springtime. Because because springtime you have February 1st, the school enrollment starts, right? And then, but the school's still in session, so the sellers are not willing to put homes on market because the school's still in session, kids are still in school. They don't want to disturb the kids. But at the same time, the parents who want their kids to get into that school district get really anxious because they want to get the enrollment started. So we have more buyers than sellers. We have more demand than supply, So in that case, spring usually is the highest time for real estate prices during a year. But of course, there are always exceptions. But sounds like if interest rates continue to drop in the second or third quarters, and then we should be expecting even higher prices toward end of next year. Is that what you're saying?
That's been the projection. And of course, the first quarter with the new administration coming in the first 100 days, we don't anticipate to see much happening then. More policy is going to be thrown out, and we'll see what the administration looks like at that point. So we'll probably start to see some results in the second and third quarter.
Sounds good. Yeah. So yeah, there are still a lot of I guess uncertainty. We still expect uncertainties right now.
But as an investor, Coco, I think that also is an opportunity for people to take advantage now with
Right.
lower prices. And you could always refinance later, but to get in at a better opportunity, all things lean to be doing it sooner rather than later.
I agree with you. I always think that right now is a good time to get into the market, even though don't ever let the interest rate to be the hurdle, because you can get a higher interest rate, especially when you purchase. If you're able to, definitely do not pay points. If possible, even get no point, no fee loans, so that your loan is a free loan basically, and then make it easier to refinance in the new year, because sounds like second quarter, which is about half a year down the road, you should be expecting the rate drop. So then you can refinance and hopefully do a no point, no fee refinance, paying no cost basically for the refinance. And you can lower the rate while you're getting a lower price at this time.
I'd like to piggyback on that, Coco, because when I look at when I bought my first property and the interest rate was 8%, and I really didn't know much about interest rates because it was a very long time ago. I thought, awesome, I'm getting into the real estate market. That property, I got down to under 3% at the right time, and the appreciation has been massive. So, there's a lot of things that they say in California, and one of them rings true. There's never a bad time to buy real estate. If you look at the numbers, property values usually double in a 10-year time frame. So if you're going to hold it as a long-term investment, or as an investor, you're looking to get into the market, usually the interest rates that are higher would give you the best opportunity to get in. And like Coco said, when they do decrease, it changes the number significantly in your advantage, and more people will be buying at a higher price, and you'll have that instant appreciation. So those are some of the things that you should consider when looking to be an investor or even the primary residence as a real estate person.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, I moved to California in 2000 from the East Coast, and I bought my first property in California in 2000 in March, and my interest rate was almost 9% for 3-1 ARM, 3-year fixed. But I was able to keep refinancing just during that year and then the second year, so 2000, 2001. And I dropped the interest rate to like 2 or 3%. So interest rate definitely it's not the end of the world. Eric, if your variable is down from 1.5% to 8%, definitely right now is actually less than 8%. Right now it's about for primary home is in the 6, not in the 8s. Okay. For the investment home is in the 7s, starting in 7. Yeah. So I think if your interest rate already raised to 8%, you can contact me for refinance. For no point.
I think even if you're not looking to refinance, to continuously be in touch with Coco to strategize when it might be the right time to do it, she's going to let you know.
Yeah.
And that's when it's going to get really busy. And that's why I always feel that when these interest rates are higher, the investor truly takes advantage of it. And I think that's why the 1031 exchange hasn't really dipped in terms of being busy, because the investors have a lot of cash. And so they don't need the big loans. They don't need sometimes loans at all. And they 1031 exchange into other assets that are on sale because of the higher interest rates. And the numbers make more sense.
Very true. And also just piggyback on what you just mentioned about the long-term holding in 10 years, the property value doubled. I wanted to comment on that. I have always commented on this ever since I started real estate back in 2003. I always told my buyers that land appreciates and structure depreciates. I always say that, even when Mountain View and Sunnyvale condos were so hot back then. I told those young people, I said, if you're able to afford a single family home, I would rather you buy an older single family home rather than a condo. That's exactly what I said. Even for myself, I bought a single family back in 2000, I was very young. I bought a single family home. It's not in a prime location, but I still bought a single family home. I just always felt the land is actually more value. And it turned out to be true right now. If you look at anything that doubled or increased crazily, right now it's the ones with land. And at this moment, as of today's market, we have very interesting scenario. Some properties are appreciating, but some properties are depreciating. I tell you what, for the good location, good lot size, good condition, all those homes are actually appreciating. So homes like in Sunnyvale, Cupertino, Los Altos, Mountain View, all those good location, you're actually appreciating with good lot, okay? But homes like in Hayward, Oakland, all those areas actually depreciating, even for single family homes, because the location is not as desirable. So not even to mention condos and townhomes. Condos and townhomes are actually depreciating, if anything at all. Townhomes may be holding value a little bit better than condos, but condos definitely depreciating. So I would think the condos have the highest value when it's back in 2018. So when it comes to long-term hold, so I want to let everybody know that condos and townhomes are designed as a transitioning kind of properties. So for people who cannot afford single family homes, yet you buy those and as a transitioning properties. It's not meant to be a long-term hold. So some people live in condos for 10 years, 20 years. And as the condo gets older, you have more HOA fee, you have more special, you probably even have a special assessment. Then the value actually depreciating. So those are not meant to be for long-term hold. So that's just something I observed, even I want to share with everybody.
That's something also to consider when doing a 1031 exchange as a replacement property, depending upon what sector you're going to entertain, whether it's commercial or residential, then the condos truly have to make sense as an investment property.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I take it back because I did investment purchase in Hawaii. We actually bought condo hotel. Okay, we did Airbnb. The reason is because if you buy single family home or townhomes, In Hawaii, that's just too expensive. That doesn't make any sense. Cash flow doesn't make sense. The condo tells, if I spend $300,000, I get my net income $3,000 to $5,000 per month. That's like 10% return. That makes perfect sense. So that's why I'm actually, even though I don't think condo is a good investment, but I actually invest in condo hotels because of the cash flow. So I guess we just have to really make sure the numbers make sense. So we can't just say you cannot buy this type of home. Yeah. Naresh, do you see special assessment on condo townhome everywhere, or is this case by case scenario? Very good question. Condos and townhomes, special condos are doing a lot of special assessment nowadays for two reasons. Number one, as it gets older, of course, without any inspection, okay, we're not going there to inspect it just because the project gets older. Then you could have roof leak, you could have foundation issues, and then yes, and then HOA is running short of money, maybe poor management of money, any kind of reasons. And then the special assessments happening right now. And right now we have balcony bill. So they actually sending people to inspect the project to see whether anything wrong with the project, to make sure it's safe. Imagine if you have an inspector going out to check the properties. Of course, they're going to find something. Of course, you have to fix something. So yes, I'm seeing a lot of special assessment nowadays, and it actually caused the value going down for condos. We're experiencing that right now. Yeah. Pasif, if looking to invest in a neighborhood states, neighboring states of California, not Airbnb, what do you recommend? That's a good thing. Yeah. So not Airbnb. I think there are some long-term, possibility, long-term rental possibilities. Interestingly, we were trying to exploring the Airbnb opportunity in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's going to be our next Tuesday's seminar about investing in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's interesting that we're exploring the Airbnb opportunities, but I found some good long-term opportunities. So for example, like $260,000 for brand new townhomes. It hasn't even started selling yet. Those can be rented for $2,100, which is good investment property. And also Nashville, Tennessee. This is like Texas a few years ago. Texas already raised so much, right? It's not worth investing anymore. But Nashville, Tennessee is like Texas. All the high-tech companies moving in, so it has very good appreciation opportunity. So that's actually a good opportunity to do that.
I'd also like to add, Coco, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
If you're looking to buy in a different state, you want to first check to make sure they're landlord friendly.
Yeah.
Because if it's not landlord friendly, do not do it.
Are you saying not to buy in California?
Yeah, well, if you're trying to be a landlord, it's hard, but if California gives you appreciation. So there's different reasons to do it. But if you're not in a landlord friendly state and you're not going to probably be living there either, it can be challenging. So it's always a numbers thing. Usually state tax, if they don't have state tax, those are more attractive states. But definitely you want to make sure it's landlord friendly.
Not that. And also the key thing for investing out of state is find the right PM. So if you're a good property manager, that's the key to success. So I'm always, when I look at out of state investment opportunities, I always try to focus on finding the right PM as the first step. So another couple areas I was looking at is Atlanta, Georgia, and also Savannah, Georgia. So those are areas worth looking into. What are those? Oh, okay. James, what are those landlord friendly states?
I don't know all the landlord friendly states, to be honest. There's other, I could put you in touch with some people that might know. The other question is warehouses and storage facilities. I like industrial property. I like storage facilities because you're not dealing with people for the most part. I do own industrial assets in Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. So I think you'll need a professional to guide you through those processes. But again, they'll know the ins and outs of storage facilities. I think the problem with storage facilities sometimes is there a lot of competition out there. That's how it doesn't work. because they're not hard to maintain. Nobody lives there. You have one person running it usually. And warehouses, again, how good are the leases for what kind of industrial building you have? Um, I don't know all the landlord-friendly states. I don't want to lead you in a certain direction, but I think you could probably find a lot online.
Yeah, Passive, I can definitely give you some ideas because I think cash flow is very important and also finding the right property manager. And
Yeah.
then, yeah,
Yeah. Thanks for answering those questions. Thanks, both of you.
no problem, no
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. And then for warehouse and storage facilities, from my own experience, I feel I like to, I think residential income for me, I think is more steady. That's how I feel. But James, you probably have different experience. I feel people always need a place to stay, so.
Uh, it, they're both they're both investments I would consider. Storage, industrial, multifamily. I'm fans. I'm not a fan of hospitality, office, um, maybe retail a little bit better now, but I think COVID kind of shut the door for me personally on owning in those types of assets.
Right. Office is very hard. How about farmland? What do you think of farmland?
If you have good water rights and good irrigation system, particularly in California, yeah, it does extremely well.
Mhm.
Can one do 1031 exchange from regular single family townhouses residents to where? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. As long as it's real property in the United States used for a business or investment purpose, it qualifies. So I could sell a warehouse and buy 50 condos in Buffalo if I wanted to and rent them all out. And vice versa. I could sell a condo in San Francisco and go buy industrial assets in Atlanta, Georgia. Should you
Yeah.
always own rental real estate in an LLC? LLCs are put together for liability protection. So it really would depend on how much liability protection you need. Sometimes your insurance policy can help out, but that extra layer of protection could help if you think that something's going to happen to that property potentially, that they can go after other assets.
Right. And or if you something gonna happen to you personally, right?
Yeah, there's you always want to consult on liability protection. Um, I'll tell you right now, most residential owners don't own real estate in LLCs, and almost all commercial owners own it in some sort of LLC vehicle.
I know some people put all the residential rental properties into one LLC. So they have like multiple properties they put in one LLC. So
And it's really something that should consult their tax advisor. Um, that's not our field of expertise, to be honest.
right. It may not be the best practice, but just something I happen to know other people's practice. Yeah. So
That,
HELOC still available for improvement? Yes. Yes, HELOC still available. And as the prime rate gets cut and then HELOC's rate is getting lower. Yeah.
I think the big message today is that we stay on our toes to keep 1031 alive, as well as other real estate um, issues or bills or anything that can come up that could threaten what I think everybody on this Zoom likes to do. I think also that you need to contact your professionals in advance to find out, A, is the 1031 exchange going to do something for me? Is it worth it? Should I sell my real estate right now? And a lot of the time it's just, hey, Coco, I really like the class and I don't know if my property is doing well or not. And she can analyze the asset to make sure that it's performing well for you. Or she could tell you, you know what, the work that this property needs, the rent that you're currently getting, the loan that you currently have may not make that much sense anymore. And there's better opportunities out there. And that's when you consider the exchange.
Okay, so thank you, James. I'm leaving my email and my phone number just in case anybody has any questions or if you need to get in touch with James, be more than happy to share his contact with you and then hope we can do some more business in 2025 or for the remaining the remainder of the year in 2024. Yeah.
Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Um,
Sounds like we're not going to have another seminar for the rest of the year.
Well, it's my last seminar for the rest of the year, so I'm saying it to everybody. I know you're having some in the near future,
Yeah,
but I always like speaking to the investor group. The real estate seminars are awesome. That's how we learn and make better decisions.
sounds great. Yeah, so we have another seminar next Tuesday for investing in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So feel free to join us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much,
Okay,
James,
everyone,
for
you're welcome. Have a
attending.
nice evening, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.